Hello and welcome to each of you. We'll begin the online presentation in just a few minutes. You're participating in the North 148th Street Non-Motorized Bridge online presentation. We'll start with the presentation and answer with some time to answer your questions. And just a reminder that you can also review information and provide input in the virtual open house, which will be open until November 16th. A link to that virtual open house should have just been placed in the chat. My name is Kristen Anderson, and I'm part of the communications and outreach team for the project. A question is going to pop up on your screen. We'd love to hear where you're participating from. Please let us know by answering this question. Looks like we have some folks from Parkwood neighborhood and Haller Lake neighborhood in Seattle. A few folks from Ridgecrest. Thanks so much for filling that out. If you haven't yet, you still can. We will also launch another poll in just a minute, or a question, to find out if you've participated in any events or been engaged with this project in the past. A recording of the online presentation and the question and answer session will be posted and available on the virtual open house page and the project webpage in about a week. So I think, let's see if that other question will pop up. Thanks all for participating. Again, it looks like we have some folks from Shoreline participating and a few from Haller Lake. Yeah, and let us know if you've participated in any community engagement on the project in the past. While you're filling that out, I'll just say we wanted to cover a few tips on how to participate in the online presentation. To use the closed captions, please click on the live transcripts bottom on the bottom of the toolbar or at the bottom of your screen and select show subtitles. You're all muted, which we've done to reduce background noise. To hear the presentation, you can adjust the volume by clicking on the microphone on the bottom left. Please use the chat button to submit any questions about accessing closed captions or any technology issues you're having, and someone from our team will help you with that. If you have questions or comments during the presentation or during the question and answer session, please use the Q&A window. That's also on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. You can submit questions at any time, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the presentation. And finally, like most of you, we're all participating from remote locations, so please excuse any background noise. Before I turn it over to Lee, I'll just report out here. It looks like some of you have participated in the past, and it looks like a few are new to the process, so thank you for joining us today. I'll turn it over to Lee with the City of Shoreline to introduce the team we have here today.
Thank you, Kristen. I'm Lee Bonebrake. I'm the city's project manager. We're here talking about the 148th Street Non-Motorized Bridge project, which is the new pedestrian bicycle bridge connecting the west side of the freeway to the east side of the freeway, roughly in line with 148th Street, landing on the east side just north of the new light rail station. With us today, we also have Aaron Olson. He is the design project manager for KPFF. And then you've already met Kristen. She's our outreach project manager. And then we also have Trisha Yunke, who is the city engineer. She will be online to assist with any question and answer at the end of the presentation. Next slide. So while we wait to move on to the next slide, I'll provide you, there it is, a quick outline of the presentation. We'll begin with a project overview, discussing how we got to where we are today, which is at 60% design milestone. And we'll run through the different project elements and show you the current design as it stands. Then we'll talk about schedule and finish out the presentation with question and answer session. So to begin with the project overview, on the next slide, you will see the location of the project roughly in line with 148th Street on the west side of the freeway, crossing over the freeway and landing roughly in line with 149th Street on the east side of the freeway, which is just north of the new Shoreline South 148th station. Next slide. How did we get here? 2016, the city developed a new sub area plan, which changed the density of the area. And as a result, City Council identified a need for a new crossing. And in 2017, the feasibility study was commissioned to identify the best location for that crossing, specifically for bike and pedestrian travelers. You can see that we looked at multiple different options, and the most feasible option that came out of that study is the one where we're showing you today, roughly in line with 148th Street, crossing the freeway. And then at the beginning of the design effort back in 2020, we conducted a type, size, and location analysis to identify different options for connecting from First Avenue on the west side of the freeway to the bridge landing, the different types of bridge structures themselves, and then how best to connect to the new station on the east side of the freeway. The main goals of the project ultimately provide a new link to the new light rail station, which is also considered a transportation hub. There will be future bus rapid transit. Improve safety and reduce travel times, increase walk shed and bicycle connectivity, and ultimately connecting the neighborhoods on the east and west side of the freeway with a new connection. Design evaluation criteria that has informed the design: user safety and security first and foremost, connectivity and travel times, project cost, appearance, we would like it to look good. How easy is it to operate and maintain, ease of stakeholder approval, and right of way requirements. I do also want to invite you, if you haven't already, to visit our virtual open house to provide additional feedback. Because as you'll see on the next slide, we do take that public feedback and we do use that to inform the design. At the conclusion of our type, size, and location effort, we collected the feedback and prepared recommendations to City Council where they selected preferred alternatives. That feedback that we collected came in the form of direct briefings with the churches that are immediately adjacent to the landing on the west side of the freeway, the communities on east and west immediately adjacent to the bridge. Excuse me, back at the very beginning of the pandemic, we had our very first virtual open house. In that open house, we had 529 visitors with 165 survey respondents. And we also had an online presentation as part of that effort where we received 66 participants. And for each of the project design elements, we took the recommendations that came out of all of that outreach effort, and which happened to align with the recommendations that we provided to City Council. And that has informed the design where we are today, 60%. Next slide. Also out of that feedback, we heard from you, the public, that the most desired project priority is, to improve pedestrian travel, maintain safe environment, shorten travel times, preserve trees, and minimize potential parking impacts. So we definitely hear you when you're talking, and we definitely hear your concerns, and we incorporate that information into our design whenever we can. At this point now, I'm going to turn it over to Aaron. He's going to run you through the design as it currently stands. Aaron.
Thanks, Lee. So I'm going to run through the main three components of the project. Lee's already alluded to these a little bit during his introduction there. The first component is the West Trail connection that provides a at-grade connection from First Avenue on the west side of the freeway to the bridge structure itself. I'll talk a little bit about the bridge and how it crosses the freeway, and then we'll wrap up with a brief description of the East Bridge landing and how the trail and bridge interact with the Shoreline South 148th Street station and the future trail along the rail project. Next slide, please. So first, we'll start off with the West Trail connection. I'll orient everyone to the figure on the page. We're looking at a bird's eye view of the West Trail. We have First Avenue on the left-hand side of the screen running north and south with an arrow pointing to 148th Street. And then on the right side of the screen, you can see with denoted with numeral number 5 is the pedestrian bridge, and that's where it crosses I-5. So as we make the connection from First Avenue to the bridge, there will be a 16-foot wide multi-use trail. The trail has been shifted slightly to the north to preserve some of the existing evergreen trees that exist between the 3 church properties there on the left-hand side of the screen. As we get past those trees, the trail shifts a little bit further to the south and then more or less straddles the property line until you reach a bridge landing or a node there shown at number 4. Also along the trail are some proposed landscape improvements. You'll see some new trees along the south side of the trail. There's also pedestrian scale lighting in the form of luminaires or light poles along the entire length of the trail until you reach the bridge landing area where those light poles transition to handrail mounted lights. And the whole purpose of all of this lighting is to improve user safety and security. Also worth noting is along the north side of the trail, approximately halfway between First Avenue and the bridge, the trail becomes elevated on a retaining wall, shown there in a blue line. And at the top of the retaining wall are pedestrian railings for user safety. As you approach the bridge landing at number 4, then you would proceed onto the bridge shown on number 5. So just a brief description of the trail connection from First Avenue to the bridge. Next slide, please. Here we are with the bridge structure itself. In this rendering, we're standing on I-5 looking north. You can see the future light rail structure on the right-hand side of the screen. And then on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the cell phone tower, which may be familiar to you, adjacent to the freeway. The bridge itself is a steel tied arch structure. Oh, excuse me, go back, please. The bridge itself is a steel tied arch structure and it spans the freeway entirely. In other words, there are no intermediate supports within the median of I-5. It's approximately 225 feet long from pier to pier. Also on the bridge, you can see a throw barrier and pedestrian railing, and that's also for the safety of the users of the bridge and for drivers on I-5 to prevent people from throwing elements onto the freeway. As the bridge crosses I-5, you can see that we cross underneath the elevated light rail tracks on the right-hand side of the screen. Next slide, please. Now we're at the third component of the project, which we call the East Bridge Landing. I'll orient everyone to the graphic on the screen. Here we have Interstate 5 running along the bottom of the screen, north and south. The light rail station, Shoreline South 148th Street station, is on the right-hand side of the screen. As you come off of the bridge, which is highlighted with the numeral number 6, you come to the first landing there, highlighted with numeral 4, and you have a choice. You can head to the right or to the south and make your connection to the Shoreline South station. Or you can head to your left or north and make your connection to the future trail along the rail, which is being constructed as part of Sound Transit's light rail project. All along these paths here are pedestrian lighting that's incorporated into the railing for safety and security. And then as you proceed off of the trail, towards trail along the rail, that handrail lighting transitions to luminaires or light poles. In addition to the main trail connections that I just described, there's also a side trail that's highlighted with numeral number 3, and that provides a direct connection from the Shoreline South Plaza, Station Plaza, to the 149th Street cul-de-sac, which is pictured in the middle of the screen. All around these areas are landscape improvements, plantings, trees, etc. Next screen. Here's just a few renderings to give you a bit of sense of scale. So here we are standing on the west side of the freeway looking east. You can see the bridge in the background in the middle of the screen. Also shown there are some of the throw barriers and pedestrian railings that I described before. On the right-hand side, you can see some of the landscape planting and luminaires that I described. And then in the very back corner of the screen, you can see the light rail station currently under construction. Next slide. Here we are standing on the bridge itself. Again, handrails and throw barriers are shown. Those are for protection of bridge users as well as vehicular traffic below. You can see some of the bracing and cables of the bridge structure as we're standing on the bridge looking toward the station to the east. Next slide. And then finally, now we're on the east side of the freeway. We're at the East Bridge Landing and we're looking toward the west. You can see the bridge in the background. The light rail structure is crossing the middle of the screen. And here you can see that bridge landing or node where you can either make your connection to the light rail station or proceed to the trail along the rail off to the right-hand side of the screen. Also shown in this view are the side trail that makes the connection from the light rail station plaza to 149th Street cul-de-sac, as well as some of the landscape features being proposed as part of the project. And now I'll turn it over to Lee to talk about project costs and funding.
Thank you, Aaron. So a high-level snapshot of current project cost. Total estimated project cost is $31 million. We do have $11 million currently secured, which leaves us with a $20 million funding gap. Because of that funding gap, we are electing to split the construction into two different phases. Phase one being everything on the east side of the freeway, which we would currently have, the $11 million that we currently have would cover the construction cost for everything on the east side, as well as design. The reason we're selecting to do the east side first is because the current light rail is currently under construction, and once they go into revenue service and the trains begin running, it's going to become a much more complicated and potentially more costly for us to get in and underneath and around their infrastructure to construct our improvements. So the sooner we can get that side constructed, the better. So that's our intent, is to construct that this summer 2022, carrying slightly over into 2023. So the remaining portion of it, the unfunded portion of it, everything on the west side, including the bridge structure itself, will occur at a later date, basically to be determined because of the funding gap. But that will be on hold as we pursue new funding sources to construct that. So larger picture, overall picture of the schedule. Back in 2019, we began preliminary design. We're now currently at 60% design. We anticipate completion in the spring. We'll put it out to bid roughly early summer, begins construction summer of 2022 this summer, carry over into 2023. Light rail station will open, I believe, the end of 2024 based on the current schedule. So it is our goal to get that east side constructed before they get to that point. And ultimately, we would like to have everything, total project completely constructed by the end of 2026. But again, it is funding dependent, so to be determined. So that concludes the project specific portion of the presentation. We do want to invite you to visit the city's landing page for all of the different projects in and around that 145th corridor. We have 8 different projects that are immediately adjacent to that new Shoreline South station, this being one of them. So this is a great landing page to explore the other projects, which are, many of them are pretty interesting projects. So I highly recommend it. The website is basically shorelinewa.gov /destination 2024. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at it, I highly recommend it. Finally, so the presentation is complete. At the point we want to hear from you. What questions do you have about the project? What would you like to know more about? And I hand it over to Kristen to facilitate question and answer.
Thanks, Lee. So we haven't received any questions, but we're eager to hear from you. I'm looking over, there were a couple comments made about, one about the panels that might be used on the bridge. If maybe you could reiterate what the size of the bridge will look like. I'm sort of interpreting from this comment what the question might be.
Aaron, you're probably best at describing that. I'll take that one.
Sure. I think the question is talking about perhaps the throw barrier on the bridge and what that might be comprised of or looks like. So we have vertical supports approximately every 16 feet along the bridge. And then stretched in between those supports is a sort of a cable knit mesh. And that is got a relatively small opening, I'd say approximately 2 square inches. And that prevents people from climbing the structure, of course, and then throwing elements onto the freeway. So hopefully that answers your question. I don't know, was there any other component of the question that it didn't cover there, Kristen, as far as you can tell?
No, but if the person who submitted that wants any more information, please go ahead and add that question to the Q&A box. We did have a couple more come in. One question was, will there be any emergency phones on the west side approach?
We do not currently have plans for the emergency phones. Trish, do you want to say anything else about that?
If I can get my video to start there. We have discussed the emergency phones previously, and as Lee said, we have determined at this point not to include emergency phones, just because of the reliability and the ability to respond to them is not something that the police department can commit to at this point.
Thanks, Trish. So there were a few questions about trees. I'm just going to go ahead. I'll kind of read the full question. Do you have a photo of the trees on the west side that will be removed? Are the trees being removed because they're in the way of the bridge?
I don't have a photo that I can share for the trees that are going to be removed on the west side, but as you drive south or as you drive by the project, you'll see that that tower, that's the cell tower that looks like a little playhouse on top of the structure. That is roughly right next to the bridge landing on the west side. Trees immediately in the area to the from that tower to the south for a few hundred feet will be removed to the property line, slightly beyond the property line with the adjacent church. Part of that removal will be for the bridge structure itself, but part of it will also be to enable the ability for us to actually construct the bridge. Let's see, we currently have roughly 45 significant trees designated for removal and about 180 new trees currently planned for planting as mitigation. I do also want to mention that there is a WashDOT project that we've been notified that is a fish passage project that overlaps our project, and we've been having coordination with WashDOT with regard to trees. So that is something that may impact the number of trees that we plant as part of this project. Aaron, did you want to add anything?
No, I think you covered most of it there, Lee. I think it is important to note the WashDOT project overlaps our project, and the timing is unknown for their fish passage project. So we're in discussions with them on exactly where to plant trees and how many to plant, because we don't want to plant trees that they will just remove at a later date when their project goes active.
Yeah, thank you. And I do also want to note that we are also looking for opportunities, if we do, for any trees that we do need to take down, we're looking for opportunities to use them as part of any mitigation or as part of their project. I'm not committing to it, but I'm saying that we're having those discussions now. So hopefully we'll have an opportunity to reuse some of those trees for that purpose.
Great, thanks. So there are a few questions about funding. The first one being, could any potential money associated with the infrastructure or other federal bills accelerate the timeline?
It certainly will help. Any new money that we receive, I can't really speak to the processes for where the funding sources, the status of where the funding sources currently are, but any new money that we receive will definitely help to accelerate. We would ultimately need full funding in order to construct the entire project, but there may be opportunities to progress components of the project in the meantime until we do have full funding secured. So any funding that we can receive will help in that regard. I mean, we do have right of way that we still need to procure on the west side. And then we have bridge piers that could be put in. So elements like that, it just kind of depends on what we can get and when we can get it. But definitely any funding that we receive will help to accelerate the project.
And related to that was, is 2026 really a likely date?
Well, it's difficult to know. This project does have seem to have a lot of support, and it is a priority project for City Council. So they are motivated to see it through quickly. This project does have federal funding attached to it, and there is a timeline associated with that. So the project needs to be completed by a certain date because of the federal funding. So there's another motivating factor to get it done sooner rather than later. Did I completely answer that question?
I think so. I was pausing there. It took me a minute to unmute myself. There's a question here about emergency access. Will first responders have vehicular access to any parts of the bridge or path, or will they strictly have to approach on foot?
Yes, maybe I'll let Aaron answer this question better than I can.
Sure. So the bridge is designed for maintenance vehicles and vehicles of similar weight, but for larger vehicles like fire or even potentially ambulance, the intent is that they would use other paths to make that crossing to respond to events. So it would be by foot only for the vehicle or for emergency vehicles crossing the bridge.
And that would be just on the bridge itself, but everything leading up to the bridge on either side. Correct.
That's correct. Yeah. The bridge itself, like I said, is designed for maintenance vehicles, but not necessarily heavier vehicles like fire trucks or some of the heavier aid cars that you might see as part of an EMT response.
Thank you. So sort of related, there was a question about any security that would be provided on the west, especially on the west side.
So we don't have security. I'm a little unsure exactly what the question is. We have measures that we are designing into our project to enhance safety for the user, and I'll let Aaron elaborate on that a little bit more. But in terms of security, like security forces, we don't currently have plans for dedicated security forces for the project. But Aaron, you want to elaborate on the measures that we're designing into the project?
Sure. So I think, as Lee mentioned, there are a lot of things that can be done through the design itself to help create a safe feeling and secure environment, particularly lighting at night. All the lighting for the entire project length is designed at a higher than average street lighting level so that you can achieve facial recognition and people can see well during, some of our darker winter nights and rainier nights here in the Pacific Northwest. Also, using mindful urban design techniques to avoid hiding places, keeping sight lines wide open and clean and clear really improves a sense of user safety and security. So those are some of the more, I guess you'd call them passive techniques that we're implementing in the design to help make people want to use the bridge and feel safe using the bridge.
Thanks, Erin. All right, we have more questions coming in, so I'll just read another one off. Will there be designated lanes on the bridge for bike ped right of way?
So it is a shared use bridge. There will not be designated striping to separate bicycles and pedestrians. It is a 12-foot wide. That's essentially with 2-foot shoulders. So essentially a 16-foot wide pathway, shared use, but not channelized or to separate the pedestrians from the bicyclists.
All right, this one might be for Erin, I'm guessing, but they're related to both the grade and the width of the bridge. So I'll just read them both. I understand that the wheelchair access along the walkway at the North Gate Bridge is a challenge because of the grade. What is the grade on this walkway? And then another person asked to kind of get a sense of the width of the bridge. How does this bridge compare to the North Gate Bridge?
Sure, I can field that if that's okay with you, Lee. I'll start with the first question regarding wheelchair access and grades. So all of the grades along the entire project, the West Trail connection, the bridge, and the East Landing will be Americans with Disabilities Act compliant. So for continuous grades, that's typically 5% or less, and the majority of the slopes on the project are below that 5% threshold. When we make the connection on the east side from the East Bridge landing down to the station, we have to use slightly steeper grades, but they are still ADA compliant. And how that is accomplished is by using handrails and then intermediate landings, so rest areas spaced at certain intervals. And so, yeah, all grades will be ADA compliant, and and that's a requirement of both the city and of the funding sources. To get a sense of the width, how does it compare to Northgate? You know, I'm not certain how wide Northgate is, but I believe it is also a 16-foot wide from barrier to barrier or rail to rail structure. So I think it'll be very similar, but I walked the bridge myself and it feels about the same width, but I don't know the actual width of Northgate. But our structure and the trail will be 16 feet from sort of barrier to barrier or handrail to handrail.
Thank you. There's a question here asking if the bridge structure will be lit at night.
So we do have lights incorporated in the bridge. We have pedestrian scale lighting that's incorporated in the handrails that will light the pathway itself. We also have, and Erin, you can jump in if I'm getting anything wrong. We have architectural lighting, which will also highlight the architectural elements of the bridge itself. That is currently being proposed, but we don't yet have final approval from WashDOT to do that. So, but that's what we're currently proposing, and it really creates a nice, attractive feature at night in the renderings that I've seen. Erin, do you want to add anything?
Nope, I think you covered it. At a minimum, the bridge will have sort of the handrail lighting for safety at night, and then provided we get approval from WashDOT, the architectural lighting that Lee mentioned will likely be incorporated into the project.
So I'm not seeing any more questions. I want to, maybe pause for a minute to allow people to add additional questions to the Q&A before we leave. While I'm doing that, just a reminder, if there's still time to take a look at the virtual open house and provide your comments there. It'll be open until November 16th. And, please share information about the project and the virtual open house with others who you think might be interested. We look forward to, you reviewing the web page and providing your input. And as a reminder, this online presentation will be available and posted to the virtual open house and the project web page. If you know someone who missed this and is interested in watching the presentation. I'm just going to take a glance over here. It looks like we have a couple more questions. Let's see. Yep, can people ride bikes on the walkway? And then just if the person asked if you could say again how wide the walkway is. I think they missed it.
Yeah. Yes, of course, this is so it is a pedestrian and bicycle walkway. So yes, it's shared with both pedestrians and bicycles. So bicycles, scooters are all welcome to use the walkway. I know that the non-motorized thing is a little bit throwing because you have wheelchairs, and so there are some motorized scooters, whatnot. Those are all intended to be used on this facility. The trail width itself is 12 feet wide with 2-foot shoulders on either side. So in some areas, it'll feel like a 16-foot wide paved trail. And I think that covers the question.
Yeah, thanks. So there's another question. Can you show the illustrations again and describe where the significant trees will be removed? So if we scroll back in the presentation to maybe the west, yeah, let us know where we can scroll back on the presentation if you want to speak to that.
Sure. Let's go back to slide. Let's see, what would be the best one?
13, maybe the West Trail connection. I don't know that we have a good slide that shows a plan view, but maybe 13 would be.
I think so. The majority of the trees being removed are not shown on 13.
Right.
Probably. Maybe go to 18. We'll have to use our imagination a little bit, but we can go to slide 18. Yeah. Back one or forward one, I guess, to the east bridge landing, looking west. One more. There we go. Oh, this one. So it's a little bit, so the tree removals aren't probably exactly depicted correctly in this graphic, but you see the tower right there that looks like the little structure on top just to the right of the bridge. If you go to the base of that tower, and roughly just south of that is where tree removal will begin, and it will continue along the shoulder of the freeway south for 100, 150 feet, I believe. And part of the reason for that removal is we have to construct the bridge in the shoulder, and then when we go to place it, of course, the trees need to be removed for the actual final structure itself as well. We have looked at, conducted a pretty exhaustive search for where we can actually construct the bridge that's not in the shoulder, that wouldn't require taking those trees down. There just aren't a lot of options because of all that's going on. There's also the 145th bridge just south of this project. So we would have to be north of that because we wouldn't be able to get the bridge over or underneath that current overpass. And then when we place this structure, it has to be set onto 2 moving vehicles that move really slowly. So the further north we get, the longer we impact I-5. So there really aren't a lot of options to stage for construction of this bridge. That's why the trees are currently targeted to take down as part of that constructability issue. And again, this is only 60% design. We're trying to be fairly conservative with our footprints at this point. The further in design that we get, we may have more opportunities to save trees. That's still a possibility. But if you can look at the bridge and then to the south by a few hundred feet, you can imagine a lot of those trees are the ones that are coming out.
And maybe just to clarify, Lee, the moving south, if we're looking at this as moving to the left on the screen.
Moving to the left. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Mm-hmm. So there's another question. Oh, if you could go back to that slide, sorry, I should have caught it.
Mhm.
My timing. Where on this slide is Thornton Creek underground?
So currently Thornton Creek is underground just north of our bridge structure. We're not impacting it as part of our project. However, from the preliminary concepts that I have seen from WashDOT for the fish passage project, all of the trees that I just mentioned coming out also are in alignment with that project. And so again, that's a WashDOT project, so I don't want to speak too much for their project, but that's where the overlap is, where we're currently proposing our staging area to remove those trees is also currently overlapping where preliminary concepts that I've seen from WashDOT for their fish passage project. But again, that's a WashDOT project, so everything that I say here, take with a grain of salt.
All right, another question. Does this impact the environment protection with Thornton Creek?
Aaron, do you want to talk to that one?
Sure. So as Lee mentioned, the staging area that we're talking about where the bridge will be constructed occurs adjacent to the portion of Thornton Creek that's currently underground in a culvert. Assuming that this project goes first and then WashDOT's fish passage project goes later, we're expecting no significant impacts to that section of the creek because it is underground in a pipe. And all of our permitting documentation that is being pulled together as part of this project reflects that current condition and assumption. Yep, so hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. So there are no more questions. I'll just say again, if you haven't had a chance to look at the virtual open house, please do so and share that information with your friends. If I think on the next slide, there you go, we have a link to the virtual open house. And another question just popped up, so I'll just pause there, but also to just say thank you very much for your participation today and in previous outreach events. It has informed and benefited the project. The question, Lee, is who is the contact at WashDOT for that project?
I can email that to you, Kathleen. Anyone who wants that contact information, just shoot me an email and I'll send it to you, the person you want to contact.
Thanks, Lee.
Yeah.
And I'll just, one more reminder, this presentation will be, has been recorded and will be posted to the virtual open house and the project website in about a week or so. Thank you again. And Lee?
Yeah, again, to reiterate, I wanted to say thank you as well on behalf of the city. Thank you for your participation is appreciated. This open house and as well as previous outreach efforts. So again, thank you and have a wonderful day.